Hello, welcome to the extended for Taurus. I'm going to just get right into it, not going to waste any time. But the next focus or the next question was what should Taurus be focusing on? And we have here the butterfly, which I love so much because even though it's kind of cliche of like talking about a transformation, absolutely, it's much more like significant than that, because if you the whole theme of this reading is almost like moving from the earth aspects into sort of like the air or spiritual aspects. And I feel like that's sort of what this is talking about. If you think about butterfly, starts off as a caterpillar. There's a very sort of limited set of rules perhaps that a caterpillar can sort of experience, right? It's like 90% of a caterpillar's life is just eating enough food to sort of create the energy in order to sort of create the cocoon, right? And I feel like that's where you've almost been in for a while, or it's just like on a smaller scale, if it's not like your entire life. I don't want to say it's your entire life, but it's almost like this small portion of the journey, I want to say, was almost like collecting enough resources, or just collecting enough resources to create this like cocoon. It's like this is the final stage of the caterpillar, but it's now you are emerging as this creature of the air, as being sort of like more of like a spiritual kind of lightness of being kind of energy. And it's you have here the initiation, right? Which is talking about like, this is an incense burner, but today was just looking like a genie, right? Like being freed out of this sort of genie bottle. But it's also sort of mirroring this energy, the resistance, because if you were sort of focusing on the earth element, it's like now you can see that these two sort of discordant aspects are now harmonious, right? So it's kind of like this, in this energy, in this sort of initiation or beginning or butterfly kind of focus, it's all of the resistance sort of becomes harmonious, or you can sort of experience any sort of resistance as being more harmonious, if that makes sense. It's like you don't see it as a struggle anymore. It's kind of how this talks to me about. Especially because the message with resistance is always that like the more you struggle or try and get out of the trap or get out of the resistive energy, the more you sort of get enmeshed in it. And I feel like there's a lot of sort of like almost like surrender and release in this energy of like just accepting that there are times when there is resistance and you just sort of have to sit in it until it dissipates, right? I feel like there's so much more in this card, but it's not emerging yet. So I'm gonna move on. Here with the Strength card, which is so interesting because it almost looks like there's like this black cloud, or how I was seeing this is like in sort of the previous stage of like before you got into this point, it's almost like this was your, like as a caterpillar, this was your limited set of resources or thinking or rules or whatever it is. And it's very earth-based, right? It's very much like, cause this looks like a jasper stone almost. It's like, this is sort of my realm. This is what I have to work with, and doing the best and making sort of the best of it. But what it is that you're moving into now is this energy, the Page of Inspiration, sort of more of that inspiration energy. But it's like, as a butterfly, you now have access to more of this sort of inspiration energy. So it's very similar, where it's like in this phase, you were doing a lot with what you were given, right? You were making the best of sort of all the resources that you had, and being absolutely in your strength, because that's absolutely a strength of Taurus or of you is to almost like create this sort of achievement in a very kind of resistant environment. But now it's like in this sort of like freedom energy, it's like you still have these sort of set of rules, right? I'm seeing like this structure above as being like a set of rules, or the matrix, or whatever it is. It's like what you have to work with, the resources that you have to work with. But now it's all of this sort of like light, colorful, airy cloud kind of energy, which is just talking to me about like the spiritual. But it's also because you have all of this already, all of this sort of strength, you now know how to work with this energy, if that makes sense. But it's almost like you have to start again, right? Like with the butterfly, you have to learn how to navigate this new experience. Sorry, there's this bird like squawking outside. I don't know if you can hear it. It's distracting me. You have the rules of the butterfly, or this new realm, or this new energy that you're in, are different than what it is that you're used to. And so that's what this initiation card is talking about. It's like having to learn the new rules, the new language, the new resources that you're allowed to work with, basically. And then here, well, you also had the star coming out, which is absolutely this sort of butterfly energy, right? It's like, do I need to explain the star? It's talking about like for me, actually, it talks about a rebirth, because it comes after the tower moment, the star. But so it's kind of like the Fool energy, but also, but it's like the Fool, but you have all of sort of the experiences and the knowledge that you just came out of. Like the Fool starts with nothing. They have the barest resources and are starting something completely new. Whereas the star is more of like a rebirth within that sort of same story or path, or it's just like a rejuvenation kind of energy. So you still have all of sort of your resources and belongings or knowledge, but you have a fresh new energy to sort of start again, or start or build more, is basically how that's coming through. And with the Six of Voices, because the Philosopher's Stone, which I love so much, because it's this connection between the air and the earth, right? It's like you have this connection point. It's bringing sort of all of this like spiritual understanding or knowledge into the physical to sort of make and create. The Philosopher's Stone symbolically represents like everlasting life, or just like a very long term, like the secret to living forever, that kind of almost like spiritual knowledge that you're accessing. It kind of feels like it's like how to live forever, or how to experience this human experience as something that is there's so much here. I'm struggling to put words on it. I don't know how to describe this, because it's a feeling, right? It's this. How do you explain this state? I don't know. I don't have the words for it. But anyways, how you may be experiencing it is this Six of Voices, where it's just like you feel like you're just being transported over any sort of obstacle that maybe you had to go through before. Because with this with these like mountains here, right? It's because it's the same thing as like the Hanged Man, where it's like before you would have to go up and down, up and down, up and down, almost like through like a obstacle course, right? But now it's just like you're being carried over it by whatever this energy is that you're tapping into. And I feel like for you, Taurus, there's almost like a disbelief of like, this can't be this easy, right? Like that kind of thing. Like, why is it so easy? How was I not aware of this before? Kind of energy, perhaps, with the butterfly, it's like, because you have wings of some sort. You can fly over the obstacles. You don't have to sort of like climb and dig and whatever, like go up and down all of these sort of bumps is kind of how that's feeling. Anyways, okay, so for the last portion of the reading is where's an area of growth for you, Taurus, and this one is, there's like just so much here, but we're going to start with the animals. This wolf card, which I love so much because it talks about, to me, almost like being singled out from a pack or from your former life, perhaps like having to stand alone. It's like the starting again, right? But with the knowledge and understanding that you are absolutely going to create your own sort of pack or whatever it is. There was some other message coming out with the wolf today. Oh yeah, the choose your own adventure. It's like, I feel like you, Taurus, are in this like choose your own adventure kind of mentality or like kind of state. I feel like there's like some sort of understanding or awareness coming in about that with the dragon and the snake coming out next. I love this dragon so much because it talks about sort of awareness, but also like seeing your life as if you are an observer, right? But it also talks about focus, about what your focus is. And with this snake energy today, it's talking about, it always comes through with the message of protection. There's always that. But with this sort of like the flower of life patterning on the inside, I feel like what it is that you're seeing or observing or being asked to sort of grow and develop within yourself is this understanding of cycles, right? Of cycles and patterns that this physical matrix is almost like required to go through for growth and for development and all that. Because I feel like for you, Taurus, you're finally seeing that or coming to an understanding about a certain pattern perhaps within your personal life, but that somehow has like a bigger truth in it that can be applied more generally to the whole or earth in general. Is kind of how this is playing out. There's so much here. And then here you have these two cards, the Maktub and the Teachers. So this card came out, I think it was in yesterday's reading as well, about how it is written. It's like, it talks about like fate and destiny, that kind of thing. But how I was seeing this is almost like coming to like a checkpoint. Coming to a checkpoint, and it's like these are the directions. So this is where the choose your own adventure sort of thing came in. I don't know if you remember this Netflix movie. This Netflix movie that came out a few years back. I can't remember what it's called, but it was a choose your own adventure. It was actually kind of a dark movie, which I didn't enjoy at all. But it was very novel in that it was like a choose your own adventure kind of story where it's like the writers wrote within the story certain decision points where it's like you as the viewer could choose which direction or which choice the protagonist in the movie could go towards, right? And it's like using the remote control, you would pick option A, B, or C, or whatever it was. And depending on your choice, the movie would play out with the protagonist sort of going on that adventure or through that option. And as the events played out, it's like things would happen to the protagonist. But the thing about that movie is like if you picked the wrong option, I'm putting the wrong in sort of quotations, because it talks about something bad would happen to the character, for instance. It's like, if you picked that path, the character would end up in a storyline that was detrimental or ended up in his demise in some way. And so then you would be asked to pick another choice, right? Or like go back to that choice point and pick again, right? So it's like, now that option A leads to demise. So now you would pick option B, but it's like you arrive at that choice point again. So what this is talking about, because this looks like a remote control to me, right? It's like you're at this, if you're not at this choice point, it's like this is what it is that you're seeing or understanding about how like karma works or patterns and all that. It's like you perhaps are returning to a previous choice point and being asked to pick again because you went down a certain path and it led to failure, for instance, for example. But then you're being given the opportunity to go back, right? It's like you go back to this choice point and choosing again because this teacher's card is coming out, which is actually talking about, it's almost like you have to go through all the options because at each option there is a teacher or there's a lesson or something for you to learn or gain from that experience, where it's like you never know what you have to almost like go through all the options A, B, C in order to understand what the proper choice is. And it's like the only way you get past this is like you pick the correct option that leads to more options. So it's like there's one of these options that does not lead to demise or failure. And the way that you know that is like you don't return back to this choice point. If you're returning back to almost like another cycle again, or it's like you're having to learn the lesson again, it's because either the lesson wasn't learned or you didn't pick the right choice, or I'm hesitant to sort of go more into this because it kind of is implying that you don't have a choice, like the illusion of choice, which I don't believe in, but it's kind of like it's like predestined or it's like pre-written, so like what's the point? I don't believe it's that. I feel like more so you have the remote control. You can choose which path you take. And there's no wrong option, basically. There's no wrong option because in every option, you will have learned something. And if it didn't lead to where you thought it was going, you can always pick again. You can always go back to this point and choose the other option. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm just going to move on because I don't know what else to say about that. But that's what this card is talking about, the Justice. Because I always talk about this card as being like making a choice, right? It's like you made a choice, and after you've chosen that option, a lot of possibilities or something plays out, or you get a lot of information, that kind of thing with the splitting open. And then with this card here, the Two of Materials, because this looks like the Resistance, right? This looks like the Resistance card. But with the Diamond here, talking about that you, Taurus, have absolutely the ability to maintain balance despite any sort of resistance in your environment. Like if like you chose one option, it leads to sort of all of this resistance, but you absolutely have the ability to almost like step back from your experience to see what the lesson is to be learned here, or what it is that you need to do in order to free yourself from this, because you know that you will always be able to return back, that there's always going to be an ending, there's always going to be a new beginning, that kind of like very like unity consciousness kind of but also mind of the observer kind of mentality. And then here it's like this, you have these two possibilities. Either it's going to be resistant, there's going to be a resistant sort of ending or whatever, where you have to maintain a lot of balance, or you're going to be successful. Those are basically your two options. There's no such thing as failure or demise, which is why I didn't like that movie. It's like the character, if you picked the wrong option, the character ended up dead, and then you would have to go back to the beginning, which I didn't understand at all. I thought that was like so dark, and I didn't enjoy that experience. But for you, Taurus, what it is that you're realizing in your life or in life in general is that your two options or the two ending points are either you work through the resistance or you're successful, and then and that's it. That's just what life is. It's like either you have something to learn or you shine. You have this sort of star energy around you, which is just incredible. And then these two cards here, the 7 of inspiration and the 2 of materials. This is the sort of goal. It's like with the 7 of inspiration, I always see this as being like having to maintain a specific focus until it becomes almost like the dominant energy, right? It's like if you're trying to start a new, like develop a new positive habit, you kind of have to work through this, like do it enough, do it for a long enough period where it becomes a natural habit and routine. And that's how you create change in your life, right? It's like a very gradual thing that becomes permanent or becomes long-term or just easier to maintain. But then like that's never the end of the cycle. Because it always restarts, basically, is what this is talking about with the 2 of inspiration, is that you're always going to have a new choice. There's always going to be another blank canvas for you to fill, basically. And here, these 2 cards that I didn't talk about, the perception and the resolution. This card is so interesting because I'm seeing this, because it looks a lot like the Prism card that came out yesterday. I won't go into what that was talking about because there's so much there. You can go watch that reading if you're interested. But how this is coming through today is the whole idea of almost like what you see is what you get, but not in the way that that phrase is traditionally interpreted. It's more like what you choose to see is what you will see, right? Like what you put your focus on with the dragon, what you put your focus on is what you will experience, or is what will be shown or reflected back to you. There's this really interesting perceptual experiment where if you're sort of participating in research, like the researchers will show you a video where there's a group of people playing basketball. There's like 2, or it's like in a group, right? They're just passing the ball, but half of them are wearing white shirts and half of them are wearing black shirts. So the task for you as the participant you're asked to count how many times the people in the white shirt pass the ball to each other. Okay, so in the video, there's people wearing white shirts, people wearing black shirts. They're all sort of passing, like the 2 teams are passing the ball, but you need to focus your attention on the people who are the white shirt team, basically, and count how many times they pass the ball to each other. So the video plays, you focus on the white shirts, you count the number of times they pass the ball, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to spoil it for you if you don't know what this study is, but I'll post it anyway. The end of the video, the researcher will ask you, did you notice the man in the gorilla suit? And it's almost like, it's a huge shock because if you're focused on the task of counting the people in the white shirts, like passing the basketball, you won't at all notice that in the middle of the video, a man in a gorilla suit walks through the frame. And if you play back the video, now that you know that there's a gorilla suit man, you'll notice it. But because you were so focused on a task, it's like that sort of information doesn't even get presented to you in your mind. There's no conscious awareness of that gorilla suit. Does that make sense? That's what this perception card is talking about, is that if you are focused on a task, you won't notice any sort of distractions or anything that doesn't match what is in your task or your mindset, your focus, whatever this is. And I feel like this is almost talking about like making a shift in what you're focusing on, because with this resolutions card, this absolutely was sort of like a message to me as well, because it talks about that in our society, we sort of prioritize or like focus our attention on like how stories are written. Like if you think about like, there's always sort of like a final boss at the end of the story to sort of wrap up like the conclusion, the climax, that kind of thing. There's one big challenge that the protagonist has to sort of surmount. But what this card is saying, the resolution, is that in reality, in life as we experience it, there's rarely any sort of that kind of experience where there's like this huge challenge and then it's just peace, right? It doesn't happen like that. It's much more smooth. It's much more sort of like cyclical, right? Things come back, things sort of wane, that kind of mentality. And so I feel like that's almost what it is that your perceptual shift is moving towards, or what you're being asked to sort of develop or grow, is this mentality that there is no sort of final thing. There's no sort of final task or peak. It's always going to come back. It's always going to restart. It's always going to be this sort of fresh beginning after sort of a peak experience where it's like you maintained this position long enough. Now it becomes your new reality, and then you start again. Okay, Taurus. I don't know if any of that made sense. I hope it did. I was just talking. So I will leave it there. There are other videos you can check out if you're interested. Thanks so much for sharing your energy with me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.